case may be, you might just be welcome because maybe you haven't attended the other two segments of this, or three segments of this webinar. This is a seminar on patient advocacy. Today we're going to talk about advanced directives for healthcare. A pro-life patient advocate is a person who strives to safeguard the welfare of a patient in the healthcare system. In the previous three segments, we've talked about what patient advocates do. And today we're going to talk about some things that patient advocates need to know. The subject for this segment is advanced directives, legal documents by which an individual expresses his wishes or her wishes regarding medical treatment, or names an agent, someone who can make decisions for them if they're ever temporarily or permanently unable to make their own decisions. It's critically important that every pro-life patient advocate understand the different kinds of advanced directives there are, and which ones are good and which ones are not so good. We're going to also talk a lot, we're going to use the word euthanasia, which I've already defined before, as an act or an omission which causes death in order to eliminate suffering or some other problem. We often refer to this as imposed death. First, you need a little bit of history about advanced directives. After numerous attempts to legalize euthanasia, the Euthanasia Society of America, which was founded in 1938, in 1967, they introduced the living will as a first step towards social and legal acceptance of euthanasia. Their end goal was the legalization of the right to kill people, whether they asked to be killed or not, with or without their consent. As an early Euthanasia Society of America pamphlet explained, the public was readier to accept the idea of the right to die than the right to kill. So in 1975, the Euthanasia Society changed its name to the Society for the Right to Die. In 1976, just 1 year later, the Society for the Right to Die claimed its first success when California passed the first ever living will law. Every state has followed suit in the 20 years following that first advanced directive. At a conference called the New Ethic for the New Medicine, the American Medical Association Council on Ethical and Judicial Affairs issued this policy. Even if death is not imminent, but a patient's coma is beyond doubt irreversible, it is not unethical to discontinue all means of life-prolonging medical treatment, including medication and artificially or technologically supplied respiration, nutrition, and hydration. 5 minutes before this statement was issued, taking away food and water from a patient, any patient, was unethical. 5 minutes after it, everybody was accepting it as ethical. State laws in numerous courts soon adopted this standard, permitting non-dying patients, not just those who were irreversibly unable to, or irreversibly unconscious. State laws in numerous states soon adopted laws that allowed people to be killed by starvation and dehydration. And it wasn't just the permanently unconscious, even though permanently unconscious is not always accurate. In spite of the AMA's statement, it is never ethical to kill anybody deliberately by starvation and dehydration or by any other means. But from the Euthanasia Society of America's first step, introduction of the living will in 1967, it took a mere 23 years for the federal government to hop on the bandwagon to enforce the right to die. In 1990, Congress enacted the Patient Self-Determination Act as part of a budget bill, forcing healthcare facilities and programs to introduce people to the living will. Or if they did not do so, they would lose all their reimbursements for any care that they provided that was paid for by the federal government under Medicare and Medicaid programs. So it was coercion. It coerced hospitals into introducing people to the living will. So every time you're admitted to a hospital, a nursing home, a hospice, or any other healthcare program, you'll be asked if you have an advance directive for healthcare. And if you answer no, you will be offered one. Don't sign it. The one they give you is not life protective. In a few minutes, we'll talk about what you should do instead. But first, why did the government join forces with the euthanasia movement to push advance directives? The only answer I can come up with is money. Before the Patient Self-Determination Act was passed, the Secretary of Health and Human Services, Otis Bowen, testified before the Senate Finance Committee saying that one way to tackle the high cost of healthcare is to get people to sign living wills. Why? Because dead people don't cost any money. Baby boomers will comprise 73% of the US population by 2030. Baby boomers utilize excessive services that cost the government a lot of money. That's what they call them, excessive services. That's information from the Center for Medicare and Medicaid Services, a government agency. One way that they're going to get rid of us is if we sign the right kind of directive. We may never have to utilize any expensive services other than, of course, funeral services, because we won't be around. An interesting sidelight is, again, we're going back to Dr. Ezekiel Emanuel, who was the chief architect of the Affordable Care Act, otherwise known as Obamacare. He is the chair of the Department of Medical Ethics and Health Policy at the University of Pennsylvania. In 2014, remember we talked about his statement in 1993, where he said they have to justify reasons for killing people who are incompetent? Now he says, during an interview with ABC News in 2014, Dr. Emanuel stated that he wants to die at 75. He doesn't want to be one of those American immortals, people who want to live as long as possible. At the time, Dr. Emanuel was 57 years old and in good health. I wonder if he'll change his mind when he's 75. Research has repeatedly shown that healthy people say they'd rather die than live with a disability or a serious illness. Yet when they actually become disabled or sick, they change their minds. Let's take a look at one advance directive law as an example of all of them, and that's California's. I picked it because they were the first one to pass an advance directive law, and they have continually changed theirs. You know, the tactic is pass anything and then just keep changing it. Year after year, the legislature tweaks it to allow more and more loose, and to give doctors less and less liability for the things that they do that cause people to die. And that may sound kind of like a conspiracy theory, but it's really is. They started out to accomplish legalization of euthanasia and assisted suicide, and they're a long way toward their goal. The California, now it's called the Health Decisions Act, when it was first passed in the first version, it was called the Natural Death Act. Now it's called the Healthcare Decisions Act. They don't want to put death in these, you know, they called it a living will, and they really want to keep the word death out of these titles. State laws vary, but share many things in common. The California law defines advance directive to mean either an individual instruction, healthcare instruction, or a power of attorney for healthcare. What's the difference? Well, an individual healthcare instruction, also known as a living will, is an instruction that you tell them what you do and don't want in any given healthcare situation. In California, you just check boxes. I do or do not want food and fluids. But then a healthcare power of attorney, or a power of attorney for healthcare, is a document in which you name an individual as an agent to make healthcare decisions for you. And that's what they're called in the law, an agent. And the person who fills out the document and signs it is called the principal. Your instructions, the principal's instructions to the agent, quote, this is from the law, may direct the provision, withholding, or withdrawal of artificial nutrition and hydration and all other forms of health care. I don't like the term, first of all, artificial nutrition and hydration, because the food and fluids that are put through a tube are real food and fluids. They're real nourishment. They're not artificial. So I would rather call it artificially administered food and fluids, like sipping through a McDonald's straw, or feeding a baby with a baby bottle, or inserting a nasogastric tube, or putting in a PEG tube so that the person can be nourished and hydrated with real food and water. In your instruction, you can check a box that says, I don't want my life to be prolonged. If I have an incurable or irreversible condition that will result in my death within a relatively short time. What's a relatively short time, and who decides what a relatively short time is? 2, if I become unconscious, and to a reasonable degree of medical certainty I will not regain consciousness. I have a whole slew of cases in my files of people who've regained consciousness after someone said that they would not. And the third if is if the likely risks and burdens of treatment would outweigh the expected benefits. I want to know who decides what risks and burdens outweigh the benefits. Is it the patient and the patient's family, or the agent, or is it the presiding physician? In Texas, it's the physician. I know that. I don't know what it is in California, but I know that in Texas, it is the physician. So we're looking at things that mostly are just wild guesstimates. Life expectancies, you'll never recover. Those are guesses. Nobody can tell you these things for sure. So why operate on a guess? My husband's good friend, Larry Larson, went to the doctor because he had an upset stomach, he thought. 2 days later, on Valentine's Day, he was out to lunch with his wife when he gets a call, an emergency call from the doctor, come in right away. I have to talk to you. So he and his wife go in and the doctor drops a bomb on him. He says, you've got pancreatic cancer and you're only expected to live for another month. Larry fainted dead away and woke up on a gurney. He said, that's no way to break that kind of news to a person. But Larry decided to fight it. So he went to the VA hospital in Minneapolis and he got good treatment and he lived for 3 more years. Good years. In fact, 2 months before he died, he won a golf tournament. But I gotta tell you the funniest thing about Larry. Boy, did he have a sense of humor, and his friends did too. Because after Larry's diagnosis, one of his best friends went out and had a memorial bench made for Larry to put out in front of the clubhouse at the golf course. And he carried that memorial bench around in the back of his pickup truck for 2 years, and he finally got tired of it being in the back of his pickup truck, so he dropped it off at the clubhouse, and it sat there. Larry went and sat in it. Larry says, I bet you I'm the only person who ever sat in their own memorial bench. So, you know, you just don't know. Everybody's an individual. You don't base your decisions on statistics. Numerous studies show the high rates of misinterpretation of advance directives. In 2012, there was a study done that was published in the Journal of Emergency Medicine, found that 78% of physicians misinterpret living wills. And now, Dr. Ferdinando Maracci, the medical director of an emergency department in Erie, Pennsylvania, says he was called into a hospital room by a frantic medical staff. The patient was in cardiac arrest. Because he had a living will, everyone was standing around frozen, asking, we're not supposed to treat the patient. What do? Dr. Mararchi immediately shocked the patient with a defibrillator. The man survived. The doctor says, there are times where we have seconds or minutes to act. In those instances, when a document gets misinterpreted, someone lives or someone dies.
Yes.
Do not sign a health care instruction or a living will. You can't foresee what you might need or want in a future situation. All healthcare decisions should be made in the moment, not way ahead of time. Some of these advanced directives are done 20 years ahead of time when you're in perfect health and you have no idea what. And you can't possibly think up every possible scenario and what you would want. If you did, that would be a book, not a document. It's never wise to specify conditions under which you would rather be dead, because anything you say or write can be used against you. In 2005, I had a case in Wisconsin. A member of the family called me. Staff Sergeant Chad Simons suffered a severe brain injury while serving in Iraq. He had a living will in which he had checked a box that said he didn't want any artificial nutrition and hydration if he were ever terminally ill or in an irreversibly unconscious condition. Chad's wife insisted that his food and water be removed. The doctors, mistakenly or purposely, I don't know which, determined that Chad was permanently unconscious. He was admitted to a hospice, the Don and Marilyn Anderson Hospice Center in Madison, for comfort care, and there he was starved and dehydrated to death while they kept him comfortable. A family member called me. She was desperate. What can we do to save his life? I said, does he have a living will? And she said, yes. What does it say? It says he doesn't want food and water. She said, but he's aware, he's conscious. When he was in rehab and he was squeezing a ball, he'd drop it and he'd pick it up himself and continue. She said, and his best friend told a newspaper reporter, it was in the newspaper, that he was answering yes and no to questions and told him he wanted to live. All of that was ignored. In spite of his current plea to live, because before going to Iraq, he had checked a box on his living will indicating no tube feeding, Chad's fate was sealed. Choose a directive that's not a license to kill you. A power of attorney for health care, sometimes called a medical power of attorney, is the document you need. In it, you name someone you trust, an agent, to make medical decisions for you if you're ever temporarily or permanently unable to do so. Your agent is able to make decisions in the moment based on your condition, treatment options, and known wishes and values. Be sure you choose an agent who agrees with your values and will make sure that if someone's trying to take away treatment against your wishes, that they can get a lawyer involved or that they'll defend your right to life. The one that we recommend currently is called the Protective Medical Decisions Document. It's called the PMDD, and it's prepared by the Patients' Rights Council. It's a power of attorney for health care that has certain specific limitations in it. One of them is that it limits your agent's authority in one specific way. The agent may not be allowed to approve the intentional ending of your life. Okay, so your agent is prohibited from doing that in your advance directive. This protects you, but it also protects your agent, because if someone's trying to force him to agree to, like they do, they put pressure on families and agents, and to agree to stopping life-sustaining treatment in order to hasten your death, he can say, oh no, that's not what you wanted. See, right here, that's what it says. And then the words used in the Protective Medical Decisions document have the meaning that I have discussed with my agent. And my agent's interpretation of what's written in this is controlling. So, if my agent says this is what this means, this is what this means. This is extremely important because the physician responsible for your care could be a hospitalist and not know you from Adam. and he may misinterpret what you meant by those words. And it's very easy to do because advance directives, they are written by lawyers, they are tinkered with by legislators, and by the time we get it, who knows what they mean. And the way in which they define the terms in an advance directive law are not the way that the ordinary person would interpret words. And so you need someone who knows what you mean by the words that you've used in your document. Every patient admitted to a healthcare facility is going to be asked if they have an advance directive. Just go there, prepared, with your already filled out and witnessed protective medical decisions document. A patient may be asked who their agent is, okay? I suggest that if you're going into the hospital for something serious, you take your agent with you, introduce them, because this is the person that you trust. So it better be somebody you trust, and it doesn't have to be a relative. It can be a friend, somebody at church, somebody you know shares your values and that you can count on. Sometimes your husband isn't the right person, not because he doesn't love you, but because he doesn't understand these things. So, and also a patient may ask their pro-life patient advocate to be their agent. I caution you here, they might not know anybody else they can trust, and they trust you, so they might ask you to be their patient advocate, and that's entirely up to you. But realize that it's really an additional responsibility where you will be making medical decisions for a person if they become incompetent. And you may have to go to the hilt to protect a person's life. I would advise that you only serve as a patient or as an agent for someone if you totally agree with their views. I had a patient I had to refuse because she wanted things that I didn't think were right. So, pro-life agents, though, are sorely needed. We absolutely have to have them because a lot of people don't know somebody. I would like to tell you about my friend Irene. I had visited her for 6 years. I went every Sunday after church and visited with her. I knew her wishes, but we never filled out one of these documents. Her 2 daughters had power of attorney over her. When she got really sick, just the week before, she told me she wasn't ready to die, and we talked about what she wanted, and she ended up in the hospital. Her 2 daughters came from out of town, and they went to the hospital and they refused treatment for her, including food and fluids. And I went in to see Irene, and her eyes were as big as saucers. She couldn't speak. She'd had a stroke. She could not speak. She was scared witless. And I went out and I tried to talk to the daughters and tell them what she had told me the week before, and they says, no, we don't like things to drag on. We just want this to be over with. Mm-hmm. Our parish priest went up to the hospital, tried to talk to the daughters. They told him exactly the same thing. He was shocked. So you have to think about, would I want to be this person's agent? And in Irene's case, I wish I had been. A power of attorney for health care mainly concerns who decides, but it's also important to think about what's being decided. So sometimes patients, their agents, and families are unsure of the best course of action because medical decision making can be very, very confusing. Even for me, I mean, sometimes I just don't know what the right answer is, and then I just tell the family, give it your best shot. Do what you think is right. You know, sometimes there's no perfect answer. But this can cause a lot of turmoil and stress in the family and in your personal life. And therefore, as I've said before, it's wise to be prepared. Know some basics. We have prepared a list of principles for medical decision making respecting the value and dignity of human life. These principles are on our website, and they're very easy to understand, and they're useful guidelines. I suggest people keep them with their PMDD, use them to talk to their doctor, their children, their healthcare agent, everybody. Because these general principles are really good guidelines to follow if you have questions. Now I have one really serious thing to talk to you about, POLST, P-O-L-S-T. It's Physician Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment, and it's quickly becoming a standard document used throughout the country in healthcare. So you need to know about it. As a routine part of every doctor visit, annual physical or whatever, people are going to be asked if they have an advance directive. I always bring I don't care how many times I've given them a copy of it, I bring them another copy of my PMDD, just so I make sure that they have it in the file. And then it gives me a chance to talk to them about my document and why their document is not good. So coaching, use every opportunity to educate other people. The object of these discussions, because they're mandated by the government, are actually coaching patients to refuse medical treatment. That's a major reason. They couch it in giving you choices about, would you want this, would you not want that? You check a box, if you want this or if you don't want that. But the goal is really to get patients to fill out an advance directive, usually the POLST, which they call a planning tool. And the POLST has a lot of different names. I'm just using POLST because that's the generic one. And if you go look on the National POLST website, that's the term they use. But every state has its own name. In Texas, it's the Texas MOST, Medical Orders for Scope of Treatment. So they all have different names, COLST, POLST, MOST. So don't let the initials fool you. It's the same document. What it looks like is it's one sheet of paper printed on two sides, and it's usually brightly colored. Mine happens to be, the one that they use in Texas happens to be bright pink. And it has check the boxes on there but you don't check the boxes. Usually a facilitator checks the boxes, and we'll talk about a facilitator in a little while. But it has options on it that are like, do not attempt resuscitation, comfort interventions only, no medically assisted nutrition and hydration, etc. There are also options to select kinds of treatment care that you do want, but that's just for show. Because right at the top of every document, every POLST document, it says, any section not completed implies full treatment for that section. So you don't need a POLST if you want treatment, because it says right there on the document, if you don't fill it out, you get full treatment. The POLST is often a permission slip for euthanasia by omission. The facilitator. Most facilitators go through a 1 or 2 day training with Respecting Choices. Around here, the Respecting Choices comes out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. And that's where it all started. Well, it started in Oregon at the Health Sciences Institute, but Respecting Choices is the one that develops their fact sheets and stuff that they send out to give patients information on things like nutrition and hydration, ventilators and things like that. And they educate the facilitators. After a 1 or 2 day program, a 1 day program entitles a person to be a facilitator and talk to patients about their healthcare wishes. A 2 day program makes a facilitator able to teach other facilitators how to do this. Imagine if a doctor only had to go to school for 1 or 2 days in order to talk to people about medical decisions and to fill out a form that actually is medical orders. Because what happens after the facilitator fills out this form is she takes it to a designated healthcare provider, they put their signature on it, and it instantly becomes medical orders. But they've never talked to a doctor, the doctor hasn't filled out the medical orders. So the facilitator she has a script to follow, and she might ask you, do you want us to focus on keeping you comfortable? Of course I want to be comfortable. Well, you don't realize that means you're saying, I don't want any other treatment, I just want comfort care. Comfort measures only. Then she might say, would you want a feeding tube? And follow that up with, when food and water are not given, and this is a quote from an actual fact sheet, when food and water are not given, you will die naturally from your chronic illness. You will not feel hungry, and you will receive good care to make you comfortable. This is not true. I read to you what happens when you are starved and dehydrated to death. You might be out of it, but I don't know if you don't feel anything when you're under deep sedation. I don't know. She may explain the reasons why the patient would not want a ventilator or cardiopulmonary resuscitation, but she might omit mentioning the benefits of those things. And POLST is not just for terminally ill patients, and it can be put into effect even when you're still competent. Because remember, it's medical orders. It becomes medical orders the minute a doctor or a nurse practitioner signs it. The patient answers the facilitator's questions and signs the forms. But in most states, there's no requirement for witnesses. And so, unlike any other advance directive, which requires either witnesses or a notary, this doesn't require any of that. Nobody else has to be in the room but you and the facilitator. It might be a nurse, it might be a social worker, it might be a member of the clergy. It might just be anybody who was trained as a facilitator with no medical background. So we're talking about, I think this is very dangerous, especially because the facilitator really can't give you medical advice. They're not trained to give accurate medical advice. They're trained to follow a script. Okay? The patient need not be incapable of making their own decisions, which means you could be perfectly capable, or if you weren't, your agent could be available, but they don't have to consult with them because the top of the form says follow these orders first before you do anything else. This is a case reported by an attorney in Wisconsin, Sarah Busher, who has heard many stories like this, she tells me, and I'm gonna read it to you. A woman came to the emergency department at a local hospital. She was in such respiratory distress that she could not talk. While waiting for a doctor, she was approached by a unit clerk who wanted to complete a POLST with her. The nurse who had brought the woman to the hospital intervened and stopped the POLST process. The unit clerk said that it was their policy to do a POLST on anyone with respiratory problems. The woman's problem was an allergic reaction to a new medication. An EpiPen injection completely restored her to health. She was in her 40s. And a unit clerk. What medical training does a unit clerk have to be discussing life and death medical decisions with patients? That's the major problem with a POLST. Completing a POLST is always voluntary. Pro-life patient advocates should advise people to be extremely cautious about answering any questions about future healthcare wishes or hypothetical situations. Just say, no thanks, I've talked to my agent about that. She knows what I want. Then be wary of every document or piece of paper you're asked to sign in a healthcare setting. You never know what's on those pieces of paper. Most people don't understand them and they just sign everything when they enter a hospital because they want to get admitted. Do you read every single piece of paper they give you when you go into the hospital to be admitted? And then firmly state, I have a healthcare agent who will make decisions for me if ever I'm unable to make my own decisions. And until then, I want to discuss with my physician everything that's going to be done or not done to me. Thank you for respecting my wishes. POLST forms are constantly being changed. They say they're being improved because of all of our objections to them. They've tried to make them look better and better. But regardless of how they change these, my firm advice to you is just say no thank you. I have a PMDD. Dr. Robert Fine who's the Director of Clinical Ethics and Palliative Care at Baylor Healthcare System in Texas, addressing EMTs, because these things go with you home and get stuck on your refrigerator. And if an EMT comes in and sees a pulse, you know, they check to make sure you didn't say you didn't want CPR. So, but Dr. Robert Fine, who's with the Baylor Healthcare Systems, addressing the reason to support the Texas most, stated, high cost in the last year of life, with 28% of Medicare dollars spent in the last year and 14% spent in the last 2 months of life. That's good reason to have Pulse, to save money. And I want to know, when is a person most likely to need their health care dollars? Near the end of their life, or at least in the last few months of their life. Okay, no matter what the intentions of those who authored the Pulse and promote the Pulse, whether their intentions are good or bad, they play right into the hands of those who are quick to put a dollar value on a human life. We've come to the end of this segment. If you have any questions, please send them to feedback@humanlife.org. You may have questions about tube feeding, ventilators, cardiopulmonary resuscitation, do not resuscitate orders, and these questions will be addressed in this webinar series. I suggest, though, reading Informed and reading Imposed Death before the next session.